And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on developing web services on Azure. I'm going to hand things over to our Microsoft Product Manager, David Mulkey.
Good morning. It's fantastic to be here with all of you today for our last session in our Microsoft Product Focus Month. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We're going to have an in-depth discussion about developing web services on Azure. As I mentioned before, this is our last session in our Microsoft Product Focus Month. To view some of our previous sessions or to view any of our upcoming webinar series, please visit our website and you'll find our archive of the past sessions and a list of our future webinars. Digital transformation is top of mind for every organization right now, and developing web services on Azure is one of the keys to that digital transformation. Joining us today is Mr. Michael Saft. He's going to walk us through some of the techniques that will be crucial for development. Michael has been in the IT education industry since 2000 and has earned a top-tier instructor status with New Horizons. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Michael Saft. Michael, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Saft, and it's my pleasure to be your host over the next hour as we explore this exciting new technology that you've probably heard about right and left in recent years. And I'd like to give you an overview of Azure from a developer's perspective and explain how you can take advantage of that technology in your current organization. So if you wouldn't mind joining me on this adventure, we'll cover as much as we can for 45 minutes or so, and then I'll stick around to ask any questions that you have on the topics or the experience you get with New Horizons online live platform. It is second to none, and I hope to see you in class soon. So Azure is Microsoft's cloud product, and cloud products generally refer to outsourcing certain aspects of your IT infrastructure or beyond to trusted organizations like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, or others. In this particular discussion, we'll be focusing on Microsoft Azure, one of their strongest performing areas of the business for quite some time, and definitely a skill that you'll want to have on your resume. Now, briefly, you might wonder, how do we pronounce it? It's pronounced Azure, and it gets its name from the beautiful color blue that you may have seen inside of your Crayolas, and that color gets its name from this metamorphic rock that you might have seen in jewelry and also used as a pigment. Now let's move on to more important material. When you decide to use Azure, you decide to use Microsoft as a partner for your infrastructure or more, and you can decide for yourself whether or not that is a trustworthy option by navigating to the Microsoft Trust Center. I don't see immediately how I can share this with students, but if you can chat any suggestions, David, or let me know. But anyway, the Trust Center is where we can see that the product meets a tremendous amount of regulatory expectations, from the highest level of security necessary to support the United States government and its data centers, to being able to enter markets like China, India, and locations throughout Europe, and much, much more. It is a trustworthy option, and that's what we're going to be looking at together, and it's an option that doesn't cost too much at all whenever you consider what you're actually getting. You can bounce over to the Azure pricing calculator at some point if you'd like to talk turkey, but we're going to move forward and just say that there are many Azure resources that are available for free. There is an Azure free subscription, and there's usually some free credit lying around if you have an MSDN subscription somewhere. It may cost a bit more than some hunk of junk that you brought home from Best Buy, or maybe that Dell machine that you loaded in your rack in your nice data center. But when you look at tours of their data centers that are available online, it is world class, leading edge, and they're able to give us that affordable option because of economies of scale, partnerships with other vendors like Intel, their access to low-cost financing as a proven industry leader with good financials, and they're able to make strong, low-risk investments in line with global economic activities. And this is their core skill. If they're not good at this, for goodness sakes, what are they good at? Azure is, technically speaking, here we get into the meat and potatoes, it's a collection of services, and these services are in the hundreds, some from Microsoft, some from third parties. When you decide to begin using Azure, a lot of folks will begin with infrastructure, lift and shift. They'll basically take virtual machines that may be running on their local data center, and they can move those over to the cloud. And that's the first thing I'd like to very briefly show you. By using virtual machines in the cloud, you can take advantage of Microsoft skills in dealing with things like managing the Hyper-V-based virtualization system, all the way down to making sure the diesel generators have had recent oil changes and that the batteries are happy. All of that suddenly disappears. And in this first demonstration, I'd like to show you how easy it is to create a virtual computer in the Azure environment. Are you ready? In a moment, you'll see my virtual computer. And on my screen, you'll see the Azure portal. You'll find it at portal.azure.com. You can sign up for free. You can also take advantage of credit available through your Visual Studio subscription. On the left-hand side, I see virtual machines, and I can click this happy little add button to make a new virtual machine, choosing the Windows platform and my favorite operating system. I can hit this big, beautiful create button and fill in just a couple of pieces of information, and that machine will be available. Now, we are here to look at this from a developer's perspective, focusing on the creation of web services. So I'm moving pretty quickly through this. I also have a few minutes to have Q&A. So if you miss something super exciting, we'll have a second chance. A resource group is simply a container. The region allows you to choose from numerous data centers across the world. And with the hit of the OK button, I see the machines that are available. And they give you computer options ranging from reasonably performance machines to machines that only cost a few dollars, to machines so powerful you wonder, is this real or is this what they had installed on the Starship Enterprise? Most of these settings don't matter, but I hope you'll join us for some of our Microsoft classes like 2532, 2533, 2487, and others where we get into all of these details over days of careful work together. We will use managed disks, and without diagnostics, most of the nonsense just goes away, and I can just say, do it, you. Just do it, you. And in the background, in one of their data centers, I am requisitioning a new machine. Even if I was a small business, now I have access to the same world-class data centers that Fortune 100 businesses use at the click of a button without the same level of technical expertise. And that, my friends, is infrastructure as a service. But what you're probably here for is some of the more exciting options. Infrastructure is what you're probably most familiar with. using virtual computers to take advantage of Microsoft's skills at managing fault domains and update domains to give you machines that, when you do it properly, achieve 99.99% availability on their service level agreement. Holy cow, that's a lot of nines, isn't it? However, managing a virtual machine is still like building a log cabin out in the woods, and we are not interested in sharpened rocks and bear skins. No, we want the good life. It's the 21st century. Let's stay at the Holiday Inn where there's maybe even a chocolate on my pillow. And if the roof is leaking, we'll just move into another hotel. That's what these other options have to offer. Platform as a service options. And even better yet, there's more application as a service options, which are basically turnkey and ready to go. With these environments, you configure, customize, and develop, but the details disappear. Platform as a service options include SQL databases, web apps, and much, much more. I hope you can join us to cover every inch of it. Platform as a service and application as a service options free you from traditional responsibilities. With these options, Microsoft manages more than ever before, and you can focus more on what you need to do and less on all this other underlying mess. Let's look at this. Data and applications. I can host web applications, including things like MVC web experiences and Web API and WCF services using a web app. If you click this happy little button, you'll notice that web apps are a type of app service. This is a generalized platform. You supply the code and they support the execution of your code, including .NET on Windows, or perhaps you're more of a PHP on Linux kind of shop. You're not bound to Windows, nor are you forced into the Microsoft ecosystem. You don't need to bleed blue to use this stuff. Linux, Windows, and others are available. Others being third-party software like Oracle, SAP, WordPress. To repeat, give you that 10-foot view before I throw more at you. Infrastructure still leaves you with many responsibilities. Unlike building our own log cabin, we're living the good life. And in the platform as a service arena, you have the ability to manage data and applications and let Microsoft deal with all the rest. Ask yourself, what would I create to support my application? If I was using a platform as a service option, where would I go in the user interface? If your answer is app service or web app, then you got it right. You can also support the storage of data, and that's something new. This is an additional responsibility, and if you don't want to deal with the details, then you look towards platform as a service options. A web app supports our application, but our data? You might use an SQL database, perhaps a storage account. And although it's typically more of a transient way of talking between two components, there's even this thing called Service Bus, also a platform as a service option. A database without having to install SQL Server. A database ready to go, built on the same code without all the hassles of having to think about MDF, LDF, recovery mode, log shipping, disasters, security, and more. This is a database without the headache. It's what Access tried to be without the limitations. This is SQL Server, but catered and dealt with by Microsoft, so you know it performs to the level of DTU, data transactional units, that you pay for. You might also need to store large amounts of data. And that's another general task, whether it's the storage of virtual hard disks or maybe the application files that you're working with. Storage of data is just something you do. Cloud computing enables new scenarios for applications requiring more scalable, durable, and highly available storage than ever needed in the past. And this is the technology. It's massively scalable. You can process and store hundreds of terabytes of data. This is the technology designed for the future. The most advanced scientific, financial analysis, and media-based applications that exist can be found in this solution. And you only pay for what you use, and you're prepared to change and expand at a moment's notice. So this is another interesting platform as a service option. Backing up before we move on, we've looked at infrastructure and virtual computers. Now we're going to look at platform as a service, and I'd like to give you an idea of how we can host these services on the cloud. Maybe it's a MVC user experience, maybe it's a WCF SOAP-based service, or maybe Web API RESTful services. Any type of application workload you can host right here. Let's go ahead and do a little Hello World demo. Every good programming class needs a Hello World demo, don't you think? This is Visual Studio, but if you're married to Eclipse, don't worry. Eclipse is welcome too. File new project, that's the way we begin. File new project, and we'll create a new web application. Using the MVC framework, we'll be able to see all of our new work right here in this little window called Solution Explorer. If you're new to Visual Studio, you can have one solution at a time, and it can have many different projects. And the project type we're interested in is a special type of .NET application that creates a user experience called MVC. Model View Control. And we can also create services for other applications and other business partners to access our data by using a related technology called Web API. And this is how you take advantage of the web. And for my beginners, the internet is what connects us together. The web was created more recently, and it focuses primarily on the web-based protocols and the newer services that are being built on top of some of this stuff. Our project exists, and on the right-hand side, we'll open up the front door and put a little smile. And we'll test the application briefly before pushing it out to the cloud. It seems to work locally. Now we're going to try to host it over here as an app service. We'll call it Saft Hello World. And I can create my new app service by hitting this lovely little add button and choosing web app. When I hit the create button, I fill out a simple dialog. Now don't get lost. I know I moved quickly through that. We want to get a lot done, but let's slow down and make sure you didn't miss anything. I basically clicked on the app service, clicked the add button, and then did what was obvious for a while. There was really just add. What are you going to do? It's pretty straightforward. This is really an easy product to use. Notice the domain name was initially this strange little thing, but you can customize it. This is the Saft Hello World demo. Saft being my last name, Michael Saft, joining you from Kansas City, New Horizons, and I hope you have a great day, everybody. Hope to see you in class sometime soon. This is called an app service plan. It determines the servers, the performance, and the features that are available. By choosing a particular data center, you can window shop and decide which machine's best. Free, the price is right. Shared at least gives you the ability to customize your domain. Basic isolates you from other fools and you won't have to yell, "Quiet down upstairs." Standard gives you additional features and performance like deployment and staging slots. But the good stuff is up here with premium and isolated. You guys are great in everything, but I can't afford that premium stuff. We're going to go with standard and hit this OK button. Here we are back at the web app. Really, it's an easy thing to do. You give it a name and you bumble through the rest of this stuff. I could have left the default values, but you wouldn't learn as much that way. All I really needed to do is A, click the add button, B, give it a name, and C, kind of just figure out the rest of the obvious stuff. It's really a very easy thing to do. You can do it. You can get certified. You can add these skills to your toolkit. Come back and play again soon. If we'd like to deploy this to the cloud in Visual Studio, I right-click and publish. A dialog appears where I can choose to deploy to Azure and pick that website, the website I created a moment ago. When I hit that publish button, it says, where did you want to put it? It's easier than it's ever been before, folks. I don't need to worry about stinking IP addresses or FTP front page server extensions. What in the world is that? I don't need to worry about any of that stuff. I point, I shoot, and we take over the world. Or usually this is where something goes wrong and I put my foot in my mouth. We'll see. But you learn more when things go wrong. I encourage my students to break stuff and tear it up. That's the place for it to happen, you know, in class. Feel free to navigate to this address, safthelloworld.azurewebsites.net, and see for yourself how easy it is to touch everyone in the planet. And now we see how easy it is to create our own fake news website. Michael invented the question mark, and he's Lord of the Moon and King of her people. Fake news. Have a great Thursday. But let's dig deeper. That's not quite enough. What good is an application without a memory? What good is the T in technology, as in IT, without the I in information? IT. I think the technology is cool, but the information is where it's all about. Our database is the keystone of any enterprise system, and it is super duper important. And that's another platform as a service option that I had mentioned previously. An SQL database. We're going to go ahead and create one right now. Before we do, let me show you something. This little website is set up to let us share photos. And as you can see by the connection string, currently it's using our local database, and I'll test it locally. And that's all fine and good and everything, but what happens when we want to, let me use a new database because this is the one I'm using in the class I'm teaching, and it's gonna look, there's gonna be photos already in there, and there they are. Okay, well, we're just gonna move on. So here we can share photos, including the New Horizons logo, which I've shared a few times in this class, you can see. So using this, we can see we have a web application that is data-driven. There's going to be a database. And if you'd like to create a web service, which I didn't create in advance so that we can kind of walk through it together, you can use old school technologies, build on things like SOAP. But that big bloated XML technology is so much. It's quite a pain. HTTP is capable of more than we typically think, and Web API allows us to expose that. Web API allows us to create RESTful web services. And in this dialog, I'll create a service that allows us to see the comments on our photos. Maybe some vendor wants to see comments and reviews for things that they resell. You could make this data available as a service. You could use older technologies like WCF. For example, that's what stamps.com currently uses. Or you could use newer technologies like RESTful technologies like Web API, which is what most modern vendors are moving towards. If not Web API, something similar and RESTful. So here's our comments controller. And in our comments controller, we've got ways of getting our comments, getting one comment, putting and creating and deleting and one of the things you'll notice if you look at the naming convention is that it's based on some HTTP features that you might recognize. HTTP has a place and a behavior, and the place is the URL, example.com/API/comments/123 is an example of a URI referred to in many circles as URLs. URI is a more accurate term if you want to be a geek about it, but URI, URL, whatever. And the verb, that's what you're going to do with it. You're going to go get it. Well, the URI will determine what you're going to affect and then the verb determines what you're actually going to do with those things. I hope I didn't just make my grammar teacher cry, because I think I used those right. And that's the URI and verb. And here is how you can create a quick little service. Wow, the amount of you viewing the conference just suddenly dropped as everybody went to go Google, did the instructor use effect properly? I'm glad you're paying attention. We're all checking the facts, checking the notes. It's more fun that way. I promise I make mistakes, and when I make mistakes, we learn more. So taking a look at the system over here, we now have a user experience and some services, and it's data driven. We need a database when we go to push this bad boy into production. And instead of going right here, we're going to go right here so that we can have a server that we can connect to with databases inside. Our server, the client app connects to the server, and the server is the parent for databases. We create the server first. Just like creating a web app, we create the server first. And we've got to give it a little name. Saft. It's got to be lowercase, which annoys me. Hello world. Woo! World server. Your server is not a SQL Server instance as you would normally install. This is a managed installation of SQL where Microsoft deals with the details and you live the good life worrying about just the code and the tables and stuff like that. There's my server. I'll give you a moment to look at the dialog. We give it a name like the web app. We also give it credentials. And the rest of the stuff is just routine. There's always a subscription and a group, and it needs to live somewhere. So it's really just name and how you're going to log in. Now, in a moment, we'll open up the firewall to allow access outside of the cloud. And you can also configure more sophisticated virtual network options as well. Here's our connection string. And if you're paying careful attention to the connection string from a moment ago, then you can already see that Saft Hello World SQL Server .database.windows.net is the destination, assuming I didn't screw that up. And we're going to call the database Saft Hello World SQL Database. And we're going to need to authenticate. Did you see my password? Make sure you write that down. Just kidding. It's not any good because there's a firewall. Everybody's, again, the audience view goes down. We're all writing it down. You don't really need to write it down. I was just kidding. You don't need to write it down. But there's my Saft Hello World. And I used the word server instead of SQL Server, and that's going to drive me crazy, but I'm going to have to live with it. That password isn't really going to be any good because all I'm going to do is add my client IP address to the firewall. Let me show you how I got here. In the Azure portal, portal.azure.com, these vertical columns that expand to the that appear to the right are called blades. Isn't that cool? And so I clicked on the SQL Server blade. I clicked on the Add button, and a new blade appeared. And in that new blade, for I misspoke. Starting over. I clicked on the SQL Server on the leftmost blade. A new blade appeared, showing me my servers. And I selected the server I wanted, showing a third blade. And in the pages of that third blade, I viewed the firewall settings. And right here I said, remember me. And now I can get in from this machine. This application is using Microsoft's modern data access technology called Entity Framework, which is really cool. But you don't necessarily need to use the Entity Framework. You can use whatever technology you like. It might not even be .NET. I want to say again that Microsoft is fully embracing all sorts of platforms nowadays. Linux and Windows, virtual machines, even provider as a service, things like PHP on Linux versus, maybe a Node on Windows, maybe Windows ASP.NET. You can use any of those items. One of the neat things about the Entity Framework is it has something called code-first migrations, which can auto-magically create things like my database. When I first try to visit the site, and when I first try to visit the site, one moment as I correct an unrelated mistake. When I first connect to the site, Entity Framework Code First has a feature called Entity Framework Code First Migrations. Just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? And that technology is automatically creating the database and all the tables, the foreign keys, the primary keys, and the first question I get from people is, that's crazy. I don't want that. You don't have to use this feature. You can create and manage your database just like you always have. In fact, these servers, SQL servers and databases, you can connect to them using Management Studio, everybody's favorite from the SQL Server world, and use most of the Transact SQL statements that you're familiar with. Now, I'd be lying if I said they were identical. I said they're built on the same binaries, but they're certainly not identical. Lots of changes are necessary in order to create a managed environment where they can make certain types of guarantees, and that's just not possible without some kind of changes. So most of the Transact SQL stuff is working just fine. There's going to be some things missing, like there's no agent, for example, and you can't use 4-part server names as another example. Some stuff, good riddance. You can't use certain things on the create database statement, like controlling where the log goes, because they have an automatic disaster recovery system that is incredible and has built-in wonderful features for retention period and other things that a lot of times would be a bear. Now we can see we have both a server and a database. Yeah. Here's our server right there. There's our database, auto-magically created by, what was that technology? You might have forgotten. It's the Entity Framework. And inside of the Entity Framework's code first design, there's something called code first migrations. And that's what we use to create all this good stuff. And so the last thing we need to do, my friends, is right-click and publish. So we have a more interesting web application in the cloud. And we will be ready to rock and roll. Right-click publish. Push it on out the door. There she goes. Off and away. It's almost there. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Anybody nervous? Will it work? Can he do it? Will there be an embarrassing error? Look, an embarrassing error. Oh no, woe is me. I think I know what it is. And who knows? Maybe I don't. Maybe we don't know exactly what's wrong. Then we'll just take it as an opportunity to look at some debugging tools. Oh man, what a bummer. My timing was perfect and it didn't screw up. Let's pretend that it screwed up real quick. I don't want to tease you with those debugging features. That's not very nice, is it? Visual Studio is incredible. And I just want to show you under this view menu, you can hang out with your head in the clouds, reach out and touch your database and do all sorts of other neat things. And in the Cloud Explorer, I'll be able to see the web applications that I've created and even right-click to attach a debugger so that I can walk through the execution of code even though it's hundreds of miles away on a remote data center. It is 11:45. And you are now more familiar with Azure than you were a moment ago. You understand that Azure is Microsoft's cloud option. And although it has a cute name, really what it is an amazing data center with countless services from Microsoft and third parties. You can begin using these services by getting your feet wet with infrastructure. We're talking virtual computers. But if you want the good life, then you're going to step into something fancy like web apps, which can host a user experience and web services like Web API web services as we created. Or you might look at something like an SQL database. Use it for the storage of your data. Join us for these courses and much, much more. And with New Horizons, hopefully you will be able to reach new heights and new potential and new horizons, I guess, with a lowercase. That's all from me, folks. It was great having your company. Come out and hang out in the cyberspace again with me, Michael Saft from Kansas City. Until next time. David, we're ready for questions.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate you joining us today. And if anyone has any questions, we'll stay on the line for the next few minutes. So feel free to ask those and we will have Michael address them over audio. Wanted to remind everyone that this session is being recorded, so I will send you all a recording link later today to review the session or pass on to any colleagues who were unable to join us. If you are interested in the material that was presented in this webinar or have questions regarding our available course offerings, please contact your local New Horizons Center for further information. You can log on to newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find the center nearest you. I'd also like to point you in that direction as well to find any of our upcoming webinars that you can register for. These are free for you to attend. So please log on to newhorizons.com, click on the webinars link, and you'll see up-to-date schedule where you can register for any of our upcoming sessions. There you can also view our archive library, which has over 50 of our past webinar recordings that you can access and view at any time. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I think we can go ahead and conclude today's session. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. Really appreciate you presenting on behalf of New Horizons.
Delightful to have your company. Thank you for the opportunity. Until next time.
All right, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully you'll join us for future webinars. Take care and have a great day.